It's time. It is definitely time to reinforce this M3's rear end. Look, on a standard E46, M3 or not, it is fairly well known amongst the community that the rear ends on those cars, they tend to fail and they tend to crack where the subframe meets the chassis, right? I have done that on my daily E46 M3. I've already done that and it is good. I'm happy with that. But on this one, since this is not a regular E46 M3 and rather has a V10, I think reinforcing the rear end is going to be a complete must. It's a no-brainer, and I'm very happy to say that James at Redish Motorsports, James, thank you so much. He sent me a version 3 of their kit. If you're unfamiliar with Redish, they're a company in the UK that specialize in M cars and BMWs in general. They know their way around. And what's cool about them is that they actually make an in-house subframe reinforcement kit for the M3 and the regular E46s, yes. What's cool about this kit is that it's a version 3, which means it covers more surface area, more welding, more pieces are reinforced, which means more power, baby. More power, baby! It's a must to reinforce the rear end on this car because, well, this is gonna have more power than a standard E46 M3. Let's go ahead and get to welding. Welcome back to Yev's Builds. What's really cool about Redish's kit for the subframe reinforcement is not only the fact that it literally reinforces absolutely everything imaginable, but it comes with a colored booklet of instructions, dude. It just tells you exactly where each plate goes, so there's no second guessing. But let's just go ahead and jump right onto it, dude. Of course, it's never as easy as it may sound, right? If you've done this before, if you've done your research, you know that literally everything from the bottom has to come out, including the gas tank. Mine is partially disassembled because this is a work in progress shell. It's getting a swap done, but for the time being, I'm just going to remove all of this and go from there. Well, the bottom portion of the rear subframe is prepped for welding and reinforcement. You know what else is prepped? My face, dude. This job is so dirty. Just an FYI, if you've never done this before, just expect to get real dirty. I mean, look at all this. Look at all the sound deadening and metal shavings. Everything's off. But dude, look, obviously you remove as much as possible in terms of things that are in the way. So the rear subframe, the fuel tank, because when you're welding, if you're doing this on a car that's working, you obviously want to disconnect the battery first and foremost before you weld. But also you got to remove this gas tank because, well, in case something does catch fire, you don't want to explode in your face. So remove the fuel tank. It's a little bit more challenging than you might think, but I just opened up from the top. Removed 4 10mm nuts on each side to hold down this piece right here. Removed and disconnect all the connection pieces. Remove as many hoses as you possibly can. Also on that side, disconnected these 2 hoses right there, and as well as this big boy right here, because that's all on the fuel tank on the top side of it where you can't really reach until you drop it down. Once everything's removed, you shave everything down to the bare metal, because when you weld, obviously you want to do this to the bare metal. You don't want anything in the way. You want a good weld. Take one of the plates, you put it up to where it's going to be seated, right? Center it pretty nicely, and then just kind of take a Sharpie, mark around the area where you're going to be shaving, and give yourself a little bit of extra clearance and room for welding, obviously, and just in case, you know what I'm saying? So that's the easiest way to do this, and it's honestly not that bad, just very messy and dirty. And just for your information, if you are unsure of how to exactly remove the fuel tank or the rear subframe, what you can do is you can click on this link right here, because I've made a more detailed tutorial of how to do this entire subframe job on my daily M3. Click right here. Once you've gotten this far into the process and you have shaved enough material to get down to the bare metal, right now is a really good time to inspect for cracks. Luckily, mine is an 02. It's an 02 M3. It only had 92,000 miles when it was disassembled to the way it is now. Luckily, it has absolutely nothing. The entire subframe looks absolutely flawless besides this one little piece right here. So this little crack we will address, we will weld it up, shave it down again, and then reinforce it with a new plate. But dude, thankfully, literally, this is an 02. Clearly, it wasn't driven as hard as it should have been, so the subframe is looking pretty neat and pretty good. The rear portion, completely clean. The other rear side, completely clean. And the driver's side front, completely clean. So I'm very happy and pleased with that. Honestly, didn't expect it for an 02. Not expected at all, but that's good news. That is very good news. But I think now it's time to move on and cut some things up in the actual trunk itself. Once you get to the trunk of your car, it is not going to look like this, because yours is not a shell. Yours is a driving, perfectly working vehicle. So for you to do this next process, you're gonna need to actually take off as much material out of here as possible. All the panels, all the floor mats, all the sound deadening stuff, everything has to go. Of course, make sure you disconnected the battery, okay? Disconnect that. Mine clearly is much easier to work with because, well, it's a shell. Once you're in the back seats, right inside, not in the trunk, once you're in the seats, of course, again, like I said before, yours is gonna have all this paneling, all these seats, all this sound deadening stuff. You're gonna have to remove all that. I can't tell you exactly how to do it because, well, this is a stripped shell and I'm building this into a race car with a V10, like I said earlier. So mine is pretty much stripped out already, but I decided to start off with the actual interior parts of reinforcing this. So you're gonna come up to the actual seatbelt, take a T50 Torx, and you're gonna unscrew these two bolts. There's gonna be two on each side. Keep in mind, if you have a wagon, this is gonna be a little bit different for you. You're gonna have some sort of bracketry system over here. But for the coupes and the E46 M3 specifically, there's gonna be two bolts right here. I'm actually not gonna need any of these brackets at all. But you do want to keep the bolts, but in my case, because I'm not going to need this and it's going to have a roll cage in here and there's going to be absolutely no rear seats anyway, I'm going to toss these belts away as well as these brackets. So up to you, but you can keep them. You probably should if you're doing this on a daily driver. You want to take the plate that looks like this. This is a 005 V3 right hand, so this plate goes right here. You see these two little holes right here? They go instead of these two bolts. But for us to outline exactly how much we need to cut off, it has to be flat. It's not flat because of this bracket. So you're gonna take a little drill bit, drill out these spot welds since we're cutting this piece out anyway, and then we're going to cut off and outline what we need to cut off exactly. Now once you got those brackets removed, you could put the plates down and try to line them up with these holes. Ideally, you want to remove all the sound deadening stuff before we do this procedure, but at the same time, it doesn't really matter. So I'm just going to align them perfectly to where they're going to be, roughly, and I'm going to outline with a Sharpie around where we're going to be cutting. You can disregard this part. We're not going to be actually welding all of this around. We're going to cut it off right here and weld up this entire spot right there. Obviously, when we're welding, we're not going to have any of this material here. We're going to shave off all of this beforehand, but just for the time being, we'll just outline it the way it is. Something like that. And now I'm going to attempt to apply some heat to it to remove all the sound deadening stuff that's in the way. And also remember, if we're removing this, you want to remove not just around the line, but about, you know, an inch worth of extra room for you, just to be safe. Voila, both sides are cut. And you may be asking yourselves, dude, why are you cutting here? I've never seen a reinforcement kit that has to be cut in the inside of the car. Me neither, until this kit came out. So again, huge shout out to Redish. You see this opening right here and that opening right there? These welds are about to fail. Nobody ever talks about the front subframe reinforcements because this is it. That's right there. This is the top. This is where that stud goes into, right? This is where it welds into. This right here is a pretty important piece. So we're gonna re-weld all this and re-weld them on that side because that one is also failing. This one's still fine. Nope. There's a little crack in here. There's a little crack. So good thing we opened these up because that's where we're going to be welding them up, and then we're going to put those plates back on and weld them all around. And now once you make it back into your trunk area, we're going to be working on this area right here. So this is the driver's side, which means you take the plate numbered 007 left hand, right, this right here, that is going to go right here roughly, right? However, this plate 008 V3, this one has to go right here. And as you can see, it doesn't quite fit because this top piece needs to be flush with right about right here of the frame. So all of this we're going to shave down with a sand disc. Then we're going to take this plate, put it down here, mark it down with a Sharpie where it needs to be, right? And we're going to cut all along the perimeter of where we marked. Once you cut it up, you should get something like this. So after this, obviously it's a little bit of a mess. You want to clean up all these edges, get rid of extra things you just don't need, make all the lines straight, and then we will continue. After it is all looking pretty much like this, the idea here is quite simple. This piece right here is supposed to lay flat up against this frame rail right here, but also up against this frame itself right here, right? So I'm going to clean this up a little bit more. I ran out of material, but we're going to weld roll along this entire line, weld it right there, weld it all along here, right there, right? And once this is sitting flush, I'll clean it up a little bit more. Then this piece comes in, and you see this little notch right here, this little tooth, that goes into this hole right here. That goes up into here. Everything's gonna be all cleaned up, welded all along this stuff right here. Except in my case, I'm not sure if I'm gonna be doing that because this is gonna have a roll cage. I want the rear brace to go down into the actual subframe and get it welded up like that, and then go up in there. But so I'm not entirely sure if I'm gonna be welding up this right here, but this is definitely a good idea for me to have, and I will definitely implement this. Although this, I'm just not entirely sure quite yet. And also when you're down here, you see this little piece right here, this T-looking shape, right? These are welds. These are welds from the factory, and if yours are cracked, you're gonna notice. Mine, again, are pretty good. Nothing going on here. Let's get to it, shall we? Let's start welding. Nice.
Speak to me, a welder.
Nice. Well, as you can see, the hardest part of the job is done. All the panels are welded on. Well, almost all of them. As you can see, the outer skin panels, right, the ones that just go right over these and on the other side on the interior, they are not welded on. And that is simple because if you remember, I told you that I'm gonna have actually a roll cage going through here. So my idea is to have a rear brace, part of the roll cage. It's gonna go from the shock tower all the way down to the actual frame itself. We're gonna weld it onto that. You know, it's gonna connect to the other shock and down to the other frame. If you're doing this on your M3 that is not track focused or is a daily perhaps, you wanna prime everything and then seam seal it and then paint everything, you know what I mean? So in my case, I'm not doing this, but for you, yes, you're gonna have to use the remaining several panels. Likewise on this side, you know what I'm saying? I am not welding these pieces up quite yet because again the roll cage is going to be connected from here going up into here, and all this stuff right here is going to be a mess, but it's going to be a beautiful mess. So for now I'm going to leave all this exposed and instead go down back here, and every piece that we've welded on I'm going to go over it with seam sealer, with black seam sealer, wait for it to cure and dry, and then prime it, wait for that to dry, paint it, and you know, put everything back on pretty much. So without further ado, let's get back to work. At this point, as you just saw, I sprayed a layer of primer. The next step would be to paint over the primer. Obviously, you gotta paint it over. While we're doing this, ideally, the next step in this process would be to replace all your subframe bushings, your diff bushings, all and everything that you want to replace, clean it all up if you have to, you know what I mean? Ideally, that is the simplest way out. However, in my case, I am not going to quite do that. Daniel and I have done this exact same job on my daily M3 before. For a more detailed video series, you can click right about here. I go more in depth into the subframe removal, all the bolts and nuts and everything like that if you want that side of it. However, for this build, I'm not quite doing that exactly yet. Of course, I'm going to be doing subframe bushings and the diff bushings on this build, that's without a doubt. As a matter of fact, Jake at PowerFlex, huge thank you to you for hooking me up with these bushings. They're absolutely solid. They're not actually solid bushings, they're poly, right? They're still poly, they're not solid, but they're dope, is what I'm saying. Thank you, Jake. However, for me, the next step exactly in this build is I want to remove everything completely, strip the entire underside, clean it all up, and only then I'm gonna start putting everything back on. But not even quite yet, still. The subframe, diff casing, I'm going to be powder coating. I'm gonna give it to a shop. They're gonna powder coat everything. Then I'm gonna replace the bushings. I'm gonna rebuild the diff, put new bearings in it. We'll see how the clutch packs are. If the clutch packs are good, then I'm gonna keep them. But if not, I will definitely put new clutch packs on, just the way I did on my daily M3. You can click right here to watch that. And that is why this video is gonna be coming to a halt right about here. If you wanna stay in tune though and keep watching what I'm gonna be doing with this build, make sure to like and subscribe, because dude, that stuff does miracles. I know it's cliche, I know everybody says this, but it works. That's why people say it. So on that note, I'm gonna end it here. I appreciate you guys. Peace.